Good evening, my friends. It's the Mystery Voice, the Mystery Hands. Tonight we're looking at the Pentatonic. I'm taking these videos with my GoPro, which is why you've got that kind of a fisheye look to it. But what that does for us is it enables me to show you the entire keyboard in one pass. My previous videos where I've attempted to do things using the keyboard as an illustration have always been kind of clumsy because you can't see but just half the keyboard or something, and my hands are in the way and everything's in the way. So I'm hoping against hope that this will work better. Tonight I'm going to talk about pentatonic scales. It's a subject that I'm hesitant to deal with in these classes because we tend to hear the phrase pentatonic scale, and we tend to hear in our brain as though that were one thing and always the same thing. And so if a guy said, you know, I'm going to play a pentatonic scale, you knew what that was. Alas, that's not quite true. A pentatonic scale technically is any scale that has 5 unique tones. Now, whenever I say scale and whenever I give you a count of tones, remember there's going to be one more than the apparent count because the first tone is going to be repeated at the end. Those two notes being 1 octave apart, being one exactly double the other in frequency of vibration. Your ears hear them as the same thing. And so we don't call those unique notes. We have in a heptatonic or 7-tone scale, we have 7 unique tones, and your octave repeats. And in a pentatonic scale, we have 5. I'm going to do this in the key of C. And the reason that I have returned to the piano instead of one of the instruments that I love more and actually have vastly more musical ability to do something with, like my harps or my guitars, is because the piano is, as I've told you before in these lessons, a living graph of the pattern of whole steps and half steps in a scale. From any key to the key beside it is a half step. If the key beside it is black, it's a half step. If the key beside it is white, it's a half step. Anytime you jump over a key, you have taken a whole step. We jumped over the white one. Those are whole steps. Now I'm going to introduce some terms that I personally don't use very often, but I have to use them in this lesson because that's the way the professionals talk about them. And those terms are semitone and hemitone. You all know probably that in at least those of you who speak English fluently, which is the only language I speak at all, semi means the same as half. Okay, if you have a half step or a half tone, that can also be referred to as a semitone. Those of you who live on Earth probably live in a hemisphere. You live probably either in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. Due to the wonders of Facebook, and I'm not being ironic here, I mean it sincerely, I now have friends dotted all over the southern hemisphere. I have more friends than in Australia than I ever could have possibly imagined I would have. I consider this a gigantic blessing. Hemi, H-E-M-I, means half. So what we've done is we've taken the globe, we've sawn an imaginary line through it at the equator, and we've taken the top and we've called that a hemisphere, and we've taken the bottom and we've called that a hemisphere. And so the whole sphere is 2 half spheres, and we refer to those spheres, half spheres, as hemispheres. The reason that matters is because when people who know this stuff and speak in the proper technical terms speak of of pentatonic scales, they speak of a thing which is called a hemitonic pentatonic scale, which means that would be a pentatonic scale which has in it half steps. And they speak of an anhemitonic pentatonic scale. An is a prefix which means not. We're probably all familiar with the phrase, well, I'm not going to go there. There are lots of words that you have in your vocabulary that start with an, and that means not. And anhemitonic means not hemitones. Okay, so first off, real quick, the major scale. Remember, there's only one major scale. It can start on any note and it can end on any note, but the pattern of steps, half steps and whole steps, never varies. Starting note, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. The only major scale that you can play using only the white keys on the piano is the C scale, because there's no black key here, there's no black key here, there's no black key here. And so if we start here, right here where we have no black key, if we stay just white key to white key, we automatically make a half step. And right here where there is no white key, or black key, if we move white key to white key, we automatically make a half step. So just by poking the white buttons, we get that pattern. We skip over the first black key, that's a whole step. We skip over the second black key, that's a whole step. I know I told you I was talking about pentatonic scales, and I'm on my way there, trust me. We skip over, we have no black key here, so we don't have anything to skip over. That's a half step. Jump the black key, whole step, jump the black key, whole step, jump the black key, whole step, no black key, half step. Okay, now, the pentatonic scale that we tend to be talking about when we say phrases like the pentatonic scale in the Western idiom, in once again in American music, in most African music, in much of the music of the world, is the anhemitonic pentatonic scale, which means there's no half steps in it. People thought up the pentatonic scale, some form of it, long before they ever figured out this heptatonic or seven-tone scale. Okay, and they went note, note, note. They're not going to play that half step, so they just jumped over that whole conglomeration of stuff there and went note, note. Now if they use this one, they have to deal with a half step, so they went note. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unique tones, and we repeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we repeat. That's your pentatonic scale. That's the safest thing you can possibly do in a jam session. If you just remember that, and you're going to go jam with somebody, unless they are really exotic musicians, you can get away with it no matter what they do. Half pitches, half steps are real tricky in music. They can get ugly. You play two half steps, two notes that are only half step apart, they pretty much tend to clash in your ear. You separate a note, that note is separated from that note by 1, 1.5, 2 whole steps. See how harmonious that sounds? See how that clashes? Okay, people who were inventing music who'd never been to college because they hadn't invented college yet, and in fact they only recently invented the harp, and they invented that because they went hunting with a bow and arrow and they liked the boing the bowstring made, and they went home and invented a harp, and now so we're off into being human and we're inventing music. They don't want to hear these nasty notes. Something in us as humans is hardwired to appreciate a certain pattern. These things are modern electronic tools. We can scope these patterns, and I've done that for you in one of my lessons. I have a lesson where I play music into an oscilloscope, record the video of the oscilloscope, and put it on YouTube. You can go look at that. You can see with your eyes what you're hearing with your ears. if the patterns of the waveforms that go into your ears coordinate in some ways, your ears like that. And if they coordinate in other ways, your ears don't like that. And so people didn't want to hear those sour notes, so they went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a repeat. That's a major pentatonic scale. People sometimes say it's a major scale with the half steps left out, but it's nothing with anything left out because the pentatonic scale came first. You can't leave something out of what came first. What came first, that's the foundation of everything that we have. People later who developed a more subtle understanding of the actual math going on here, they invented these half steps and they said, under certain circumstances, we can play these notes. And they will actually add to and expand the music that we have. But when we started out, we weren't that complicated yet. Mama's little baby loves shortening bread. My friends, the pentatonic scale is the ancient root of all music in the West, and it still works today. And you can build it out of any heptatonic scale on any instrument. You don't need to do any funny stuff. I'm going to change instruments here. I'm going to glue these two videos together into one. I want you to see how this works on a fully diatonic instrument. This is a chromatic instrument. I talk about these terms. A chromatic instrument will make every possible vibration of the 12-tone scale that we have come to know and love as the roots and sources of music in much of the world. That's not the only thing you can do. I mean, I play a steel guitar. Y'all know I play steel guitars. I can make any conceivable pitch 1/1000th of one vibration faster than the next pitch by just sliding my bar just a little tiny way. When I do that tremolo thing I do all the time on my steel guitar, I'm playing pitches that don't exist on this piano. You know that, you understand that. But, and violin players can do it, and bass players can do it, and everything that doesn't have frets can do it. Regular fretted guitar players can't do it. Piano players can't do it. Flute players can't do it because we have this. Even on the flute, though, when I played the flute, I could play a note on my flute and I could roll that instrument towards me. I can't do this anymore because of surgery on my lip that I don't have the muscle control to play that instrument anymore. But I could roll that instrument in towards me and it would cause that note to go flat. So even on the flute, which has buttons that you push to select the note you want, you can play things that are in between the notes. So that is a nod to reality. And if you will be so kind, I'm going to ask you to now pretend that reality doesn't matter to you. We only have 12 tones. I'm going to start on that C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And my C is my 13th, or my octave, or my 1. So you have 12 unique tones in the chromatic scale. There are people today writing music who use all 12 tones in a composition. It's very, very modern version of what we still are calling classical music, even though people write it today. Some people like it. Some people think it sounds like a train wreck. Some people hate it. I don't care. Music is so subjective. There is no good. There is no bad. There is I like it and I don't like it. Those are the only two valid things you can say about whether music is good. Okay? If the other guy likes it, it's good where he's sitting. If I don't like it and he likes it, then the best thing we can do is find something we both like and listen to that, because we're both right. Okay, nevertheless, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and this is a fully chromatic instrument. The harp, the Celtic harp, unless one chooses to move levers in midstream, the Celtic harp, which is set with all its levers in one fixed position and not changed during the middle of the song, is a diatonic instrument. It will only play one major scale, whatever major scale it happens to be tuned to at that moment. It will also play lots of minor scales. I want you to watch this. Even though we're mostly talking about pentatonic scales today, I'm going to cover a little bit about minor scales. If I start on C on the white keys, I'm going to get a major scale. If I start on any other white key and play 7 unique tones and repeat my beginning one, I'm going to play some kind of a minor or diminished scale. These things are known as modes. That word will not be on the test from today's lesson. Someday I'll get into modes. C major scale. I said earlier in this lesson that there's only one major scale. What I mean is that there's only one pattern of whole steps and half steps which can be played and referred to as a major scale. Anything else is some minor or modal scale, pentatonic scale, something, but it's not a major scale. Heptatonic major scale. Anybody wants to argue with that, I would appreciate it if you go out behind a woodshed. Out there, we've got a compost heap, we've got a donkey, and we take all of our donkey's byproduct and we put it in the compost heap for future use on the garden. Go argue with the compost heap, because I don't want to talk about it. Okay? Now, if I start on any note but the C, you see how odd that feels to you? Because your ears and your body and everything about you is hardwired to expect a certain pattern of whole and half tones, and that doesn't match that. That's a minor scale. It's only one major scale, but there are many minor scales. There's a harmonic minor scale and there's a melodic minor scale, and I don't know them all. I'll have to study up on that before I do a minor scale class. And we've come back to our major scale. And it consists of one whole step, one whole step, one half step, one whole step, one whole step, one whole step, and one half step. Before the half steps were invented, people invented the pentatonic scale, and it went one whole step, one whole step, a step and a half, a whole step, a step and a half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Resolution. I'm going to stop this video now. I'm going to get out the harp, and I'm going to show you just a little bit of the same thing as you can do it on a harp. Hold on. Okay, now I'm still videoing this with my GoPro, which is one of those point of view cameras, and they're real fisheye, and I'm choosing to use the fisheye because I want to expose the entire instrument to your eyes at the same time and not have any narrow focus. This instrument is currently tuned in C. I keep this particular harp always tuned in an E flat when it's open. Those of you who are harp players know that I have to move levers. I have sharped my E flat up to an E natural. I have sharped my A flat up to an A natural, and I have sharped my B flat up to a B natural, because the flats, the key of E flat is a key of 3 flats, E, A, and B flat. But by sharpening these up to naturals, I have this harp set in the key of C. The reason I've chosen to do that for this lesson is because we are, everything I did on the piano I did in C. Now the red strings are C's, more or less. And so when I play from red to red, I will have played a C scale. Like that. That is a heptatonic C major scale. Hepta, 7 tonic tone, 7 unique tones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a repeat of the octave note. Okay? I'm sorry that I'm doing this. I should have put the camera over on the other side so you could see it better. But that would be kind of tricky because of the way my little house is laid out. I don't really have a space to do that very easily. Okay, so now what do we got? We know the pattern. Root note, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Now to play a pentatonic and hemitonic, no half steps, major pentatonic scale, we have to leave out this, because that's a half step, and we have to leave out this, because that's a half step. So we're going to go you can do that in any key. I've had friends, harp players, say, well, to make a pentatonic scale on a harp, you move these levers like this. But what they're actually doing is they're moving levers so as to sharp the half step tones so that they have 2 consecutive repeats of the same tone. That there's a certain validity to that, because that means you have a bomb-proof, you can't mess it up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a pentatonic scale no matter what strings I pick. Pentatonic scale. The way I do it, you have to dodge the notes you're not allowed to use. That means you have to dodge that note, because to get from it to the next note is a half step. Why do you have to go to this note? Who cares? Why can't I just play that note and stop there and not call myself somehow committed to that half step? Why can't I just leave that out? I mean, I know what's going on here, okay? Root note, whole step. Obviously I can't play this one because it's a half step. From here to here is a half step. So if I'm going here, here, and here, I can't go there. That's a half step. But what about this other one, okay? Those are all whole steps. From here to here is actually a step and a half. It's a whole and a half. It's a step and a half. But that's cool. It's greater than a half step. When I say and hemitonic, no half steps, I don't mean there will not be any intervals which have half step characteristics in them. I will mean there will not be any intervals which are only a half step. There will be a whole step or greater on every interval. Whole step or greater. No intervals which are smaller than 2 half steps or 1 whole step. Okay, but back to the original question. Okay, so root note, whole step, step and a half, step. Okay, well to there it's a step. Why can't I just go there and quit? Because of the thing I spoke to you about in a recent lesson called resolution. This note does not resolve your scale. Our ears, our bodies, our souls, our humanity wants the songs that we play to resolve. It wants them to end. I said again, Mama's little baby loves shortening bread. We want resolution. If we attempt to go up this scale, there is no resolution. There is no finish. You're stuck on the interstate 2.5 miles from the exit. You can't get there from here. So you've got to leave out this note, because it's only half step from here. You've got to take this step and a half. And that, my friends, is how an heptatonic pentatonic scale works. And that is, if somebody comes up to you and says, play me a pentatonic scale, and they do not have a PhD in music theory, and they're not just looking for a chance to play gotcha, but they're actually curious, they want to hear what one sounds like, that's the scale they're talking about. That's not the only possible pentatonic scale. There's also minor pentatonic scale, but that's a different day, a different class. I always do, and I tell you this, I mean it in all sincerity, I appreciate my students, I appreciate my followers, I appreciate the people who listen to my lessons. I give you the very best I can of a reasoned approach for people who are not trying to get college degrees, but people who are in this for the music, because that's what I'm doing here. And I assume that that's what my students are doing here. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you spending this time with me this evening. I hope you found something of value for you in this lesson. I hope you'll stick around and hear my other lessons as we go forward. We will be going forward. I've decided, just as a little heads up, I've decided I really do have to do some on paper how it looks like when it's written down lessons, because we can't get much farther from where we are without indulging in those facts. It's not that you must learn them. It's not that you must be able to use them. It's that you must be exposed to them to see how these other things work. Why 1, 4, and 5, for crying out loud? Things like that really matter, because they're what you do to make music that pleases your audience. That's really what this is all about. We want music that pleases ourselves. We want music that pleases our audiences. The two most important people in the world when you're a musician are yourself and the person who's listening to you. Thank you for coming. Once again, have a good evening. Play music.